Hello, welcome to MaddK Studio episode 6. Today we're going to talk about careers in art and different careers you can have. You know, there's a ton of different ways to be an artist or be in the world of art, even if you're just a creative person and not necessarily an artist. So let's take a dive into a bunch of different ways that you can be an artist or artistic as a career. The MaddK Studio Show. The first thing people think about when they are getting into an art career or thinking about an art career is being an artist. So that is something like a painter. You know, someone says if you're an artist, you're a painter, you think about Da Vinci or someone like that. That is one way of being an artist. You know, another way of thinking about that is, that's a fine art. So that's the kind of the purest form of art, just as a fine artist. And that would include painting, like I would say oil painting, things like that. So oil painting, acrylics, watercolor, pastels, charcoal, making prints and selling them, airbrushing. So if you think about an oil painter, like a real fine oil painter, if you go online, especially on YouTube and look it up, there's so many of them. So as I would say, it's one of the hardest ways to make a living is to be an artist, just to be an artist for artist's sake. I know also that because I'm trying to do that myself. But if you think about the amount of time and work it takes to become proficient at your craft, it really takes a long time and a lifetime. And it's a matter of talent. It's a matter of perseverance, and it can be really difficult. And I find a lot of artists are like myself, are terrible business people on a lot of ways. And I spent a long time in my 20s absolutely screwing up every kind of success I had with art. I was never able to capitalize on it very well because I was a terrible business person. And that's part of being a creative individual. The guys that are, the artists, I should say, that are successful, either are very good at their business end of things, or they have people around them that are very good at it that take care of it, which is what I hope to have. But anyway, so if you think about that, that's kind of what the beginning of is that artist, that painter, and watercolor painter, pastels, oils, like I mentioned before. That would be the first type of artist. That's the general thought when people say, "Oh, I'm going to be an artist." The next type of artist that we can see is a sculptor. So think about public sculptures, things like that. You know, when we talked about painting before, you can have gallery openings and things like that kind of style of business. And with your sculpture, it's the same kind of idea. You know, people think of sculptures all different ways. Some are huge. You know, the Statue of Liberty is a large sculpture. There's a lot of government grants and that kind of things to do sculptures. You'll also see that in, if anyone's ever been to Vegas, there's sculptors all down there doing all kinds of crazy stuff and really neat things in ways of using your sculptor mentality and your sculptor's talents to create artwork just to sell. In sculpture in the fine arts world is really popular and always has been. I think that one of the aspects of sculpture also goes back to drawing and painting and things like that, because most sculptors also do some of that as well. You know, to be able to lay out their thoughts and work through it. And sculpture as an art form, let me back up. If you combine painting, drawing, and sculpture as an art form, you get into that's actually you're designing physical things and not just a representation of a physical thing. So we'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about industrial design, ID. Next up is illustration. Illustration, I did a whole show on illustration a few weeks ago. You can see that in the links below, or just follow me on the show. Subscribe, by the way, as long as I'm talking about it. If you like what I'm doing here, subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, you're going to be in luck because this one is a very non-visual show. This is just me talking. I'm not going to put a bunch of images, whatnot. But anyway, we're going to talk about illustration. So illustration can be anything from, obviously it's an illustration for lack of a better term, it's just a drawing of something or an illustration of an idea of something. You see them a lot in magazines, billboards, technical books, album covers. So illustration is one of the largest ways of getting into an art career, and you can be really once you've got a style and something you like to do, it's a really fun way to do it. I do a ton of illustration. I always have, and it's been very fulfilling. I enjoy that very much. If you think about magazine ads, you think about every magazine ad you've seen. They're becoming less and less just with the advent of everything online and whatnot. You don't see as many magazines, but there was some great illustrators. You think of Norman Rockwell, in the Saturday Night Post, Saturday Evening Post, whatever one he was in, and Vargas and some of the other illustrators that did some really, really great illustrations for magazines. So I recommend, if you're into illustration, you like to draw, you like to do that kind of thing, or if you're just kind of an illustrator right now, remember, look back at the past at what illustration, and especially in ad copy and things like that, have done over the course of basically the last century. Think about, look to those kind of things for inspiration. There's so much out there that's interesting to see and interesting to look at from an illustration point of view. You think about billboards. I used to work at a place that painted billboards, so we were doing illustrations that were I didn't do any billboards, but the guy there that I worked with did, and these were 14 feet tall by 48 feet long of a big illustration of a Dodge truck, or might have been a big leaf or something like that. You never knew what it was going to be, but digital printing kind of wiped that industry out within a couple of years, because the $5,000 painting that you'd have to do on a billboard, you could now print in full color as a photographic image in that quality for like $800-900. That kind of wiped that out, but still there's a use for it. Someone still has to design that. Someone still has to lay out the illustration that's going to go on that billboard that gets digitally printed. So it really hasn't put an illustrator out of work. It's put a large format illustrator out of work. Technical illustration is also something that's always been very popular. I think about medical journals, illustrations of mechanical parts, putting together instructions, things like that. There's a lot of illustration that is involved with all of those things. That's another thing to consider if you like doing the more technical side of things. Some of the medical illustrators are just absolutely brilliant. It's just incredible. And also, you want to think about illustration as in books. So if you've ever read a book that explains something, or just has drawings in it, or images about the story in the book, that's all illustration. That's someone had to do that. The book cover itself had to be illustrated. Someone had to illustrate that book cover. Album covers, like I mentioned in the beginning of this, there's been so many cool album covers over the history of time. Just Google album cover art. Watch what you come up with. You can go down a rat hole for about 3 hours. It's really, really cool. Especially some of the heavy metal albums are really, really awesome with some of the artwork. Iron Maiden with Eddie. Eddie was this evil devil guy that was on their albums, but it was so beautifully painted on a lot of things. It was really crazy looking, but it's really scary. Halloween, the illustration that goes on around Halloween is just insane. I mean, or Christmas, holidays, everything you see, all these kind of things. Think about the Coca-Cola Santa Claus and how many illustrations have been done just of that, with his rosy cheeks and he's holding a Coke and, hey, have a Coke. So illustration's a great way of thinking about an entry level into the world of art. And you can do that on the side. You can do it, as your full career, and a lot of different options for you there. All right. The next one I'm going to talk about is graphic design. I'm kind of going to blend that in with layout design too, because they blend together really well. So graphic design, most people know what graphic design is, or they think they know. It's laying out graphics is what the general idea is. But if you really drill down into it, it's creating an artful image of text, and how that lays out and how that works together in some sort of cohesive unit. I mean, you can go on and on. It's a lot of BS, actually. But anyway, graphic design is just kind of a generic term for artfully connotating something that's more in the realm of advertising. So business advertising, if you think about looking at printed word and layout, I guess that would be the best way. Printed word and layout. Now, graphic design also goes hand in hand with illustration in industrial design, and illustrations all are also somewhat graphic design projects in a lot of ways. I mean, composition and layout and all that kind of thing is very important. When I talk about composition, I'm just talking about where it sits on the page. When I talk about layout, it's if you have multiple pages and multiple ideas to get across, how do you lay those out in such a way that makes sense? So, catalogs. If you think about a catalog, we're working through our catalog right now at work, and it's about 80, 90 pages. The layout for that is all a graphic design. So you have to take all these images, photographs, illustrations, copy, numbers, prices, price lists, and put them all together in a way that makes sense to the reader that looks at it, that's not going to confuse them, and that's graphic design. It can be purely aesthetic too. Think about logos. Like a logo, a graphic design is one of the things that people think of graphic design. They think of logo design, and logo design is absolutely graphic design. It can also be illustration. It can also be drawing, but it puts those all together, and then you put those together with your product and advertise them, and then you have to create a layout. So all of those things work so well together that you need to really look at what you like to do. So it's finding that thing that you like to do while you're creating something that somebody else will find value in. Which brings me to graphic design, layout, art direction. So art direction, it's another wide open thing. So if you think of the word art director, an art director is someone that is in charge of overseeing, the art creation and usage in a company or project. And that can, art directors, that's the whole field in itself. It's a whole show in itself. I could probably do 5 shows on art direction. But if you think about in a large scale project, you need someone that's going to have the final say on, it needs to look like this, it needs to be that, this is the style that we're trying to connotate here, and this is the feel that we want. And an art director is the person that puts that all together. Some places just call them a project manager, but art director is a lot more visual. Once you have your graphic design and your layout, and you have an art director, think about the print industry, because in printed materials now, it's not nearly as big as it used to be. Like I had mentioned before, magazines are kind of on their way out. But the print industry is still a huge industry. You have to print everything. And package design still gets printed. All the packages and boxes, when you order something from Amazon, a beautiful box comes in, you read it, and you have all the instructions. If you're going to Best Buy, everything that's written on the box, the product features and things you need to see, it's illustration, it's graphic design, it's photography, and it's also layout. So all that has to be printed somewhere. In the print industry, you need to be able to see color and be able to see the differences in printing. If a color is a little bit off or a little bit you do something called a press check. That's something that you do in the printing industry with the art director of the project. So the press check is, we've created all this art, we've sent it to you, you've made everything you need to get it printed. You print the first sample of it, and when it comes off the press, you look at it and say, okay, we're going to compare this to the original. Is the black enough? Is it two reds? And that's all color theory that you have to be able to understand and know and see and have the eye for it. So the print industry involves that. You could be working on a printing press. It could be on the layout graphic side of things. There's a huge amount of opportunity there. Next one I'll talk about is industrial design. Now, industrial design is what I've been doing for the last 20-some years. It's industrial design, product design. Think about everything that you touch, that you use, that you feel, that's a product, medical device, jar, everything you can think about, even right down to this is the lens cap for the camera that I'm shooting this on right now. An industrial designer had to design this. He had to figure out what the shapes were, how this little mechanism was going to work. There's some engineering involved with it too. An industrial designer is not an engineer, and an engineer is not an industrial designer. However, there is quite a bit of crossover. So that's something to consider. um, literally everything you use. So when you go into any store, the product that you're going to buy, someone had to design it. The box that it sits in, someone had to design it. The shelves that they go on, someone had to design those. The cases, someone had to design those. The clothes that people wear, someone had to design those. The flooring, someone had to design those. All these things can be considered industrial design. It's kind of a big envelope. I've been doing it in the motorcycle industry for a long time, designing products, and it's been pretty freaking cool, actually. Especially now with industrial design, one of the great things in the industrial design world is the 3D printing world. It's just exploded. There's so many different options. I've got a Stratasys 370 is the number, the one that I use quite a bit. I'm looking at buying one for the home, and I'm just kind of doing some research right now on which one's the best one, which is going to do what I need it to do for some of the projects I'm working on. But again, that's all industrial design, ID. I get a lot of people ask me, what do you do? Oh, I'm an industrial designer. And they're like, well, so you like design bridges or factories? And no, it's not either of those. It's just about everything you can imagine has been designed by somebody. So industrial design really encompasses illustration and sculpture. If you mix those two together, I guess that's the best way to do it. When I was in college at MaddK, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, in the late 80s, when I went there for illustration, I saw what the industrial design students were doing, and I was like, they get to make stuff, and I want to make things. So that's what brought me into it, because I didn't even know what industrial design was, hadn't thought about it. But since then, it's been 30 years of creating products. In addition to industrial design, there's things like paper making, soft goods, fashion. So if you think about, when I think about paper making, what I'm really looking at is custom papers and custom, I don't know a lot about it, but we had paper making studio at school, and you see, custom papers. And when you get into, especially, think about like a wedding invitation. You want a special kind of stationery for that. A lot of people use custom papers for that to print on or hand write on and things like that. So I don't know how big of an industry it is. I'm sure it's rather large, and if you're good at it, you're going to get well known. There's so many really cool custom papers that you can use for invitations. And again, if you have a layout and a graphic design that's really neat, when you put it on a custom paper, maybe a handmade, hand pulped, incredible piece of art to start out with, and then you can put your design on top of it. It just enhances it. So paper making is something that I said I don't know a lot about. I've just seen it, quite a bit of it, and thought I'd add that in there. So along with paper making, I mentioned the soft goods, sewing. That's the art. Look at my notes here. Kind of created from fabrics. Think of table runners, wall hangings, quilting, weaving, that kind of thing. There's a huge market for that. So going to any furniture store, you're going to see artwork that is fabrics. I mean, think about a tapestry, carpet, Arabian, what do they call those Arabian carpets? From the Middle East, they make those incredible carpets. I can't think of the name of them. Oh yeah, senior moment. But I've got a new good friend I've been working with on the Freedom Accelerator program and on the 9-Figure Network that I talk about quite a bit. And it's Carol LeBaron. And she opened my eyes to what soft goods could be, where she dyes her own wool and makes these beautiful art pieces out of it. And in a small world, she had done some large format pieces that hung in the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. And the last time I was down there, I remember looking at them and going, wow, that's a really interesting tapestry that was sitting there, the way it was done. And these were all hand-dyed, hand-sewn together, very large pieces. I don't remember exactly what size it was, but you should check her out. It's Carol LeBaron. I'll put a link below to her website and her social media stuff, because it's a great illustration of soft goods as art. When I mentioned table runners, that's just one of the soft goods I think about that is interesting to me. It can be anything, and they range they run the gamut in design from very simple to extremely ornate. Embroidery is another art that, whether it's hand embroidery or machine embroidery, it still needs to be laid out and put together and added into a fabric with a care and a style of art that or an eye for the art that has to make sense. Quilting is huge. My sister quilts. My wife's done some quilts before, and quilting is it's just a giant industry that has use for you can make the quilts yourself. You can make they're called fat quarters, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I know my wife had a lot of fat quarters. So those of you guys that are watching this and know what fat quarters are, you can go ahead and explain it to the rest of the team here, because I have no idea. But there's people that sell these all over the place, and Etsy is full of quilters, and there's quilting shops, and there's all kinds of ways to take the talent you have for quilting and create a career out of it. Weaving is another thing. I don't know hardly anything about weaving or basket weaving or any kind of weaving, but I know that I see it out there. I see people selling it. I see it in the stores, a lot of the high-end stores in Stillwater and Hudson, kind of near where I am, Wisconsin and in Minnesota. There's wall hangings and things like that are woven. I don't know if they're hand woven. I don't know how they're done, but it's just something else to look into. That if you like that, that's something to think about. I mean, there's so many different ways of looking at a career in art. Weaving is just another one of those ways. The last subject I'll bring up today is the world of fashion and fashion design. So fashion design, you see the runway models going down there, and at the end, the designer comes out with all the beautiful models and everything like that. Some stuff is just so far out there, it's just crazy. Other things just make sense. But fashion design in a world, go into any, like Joann Fabrics, go into a Joann Fabrics and go to where they sell the patterns to make clothing. And you can go through those patterns, and some of them are from the 50s and some of them are brand new, and they all have a picture or an illustration or a drawing or some kind of fashion design going on to show you what it is. So in the world of fashion design, you can be the illustrator and the designer that's laying out what the actual clothes are going to look like. You could be the pattern maker that takes the designer's vision and creates something that is actually makeable. You could be the person that creates the print work in the sales copy and everything like that, in the layout with graphic design and illustration being used to sell it. It's an excellent avenue to go if you're interested in clothing and things like that. Sneaker design, I consider that in fashion design, shoe design, things like that. Steve Madden and Nike and all these people, there's so much design that goes in, and artwork and drawing and illustration and computer graphics. And we didn't even touch really on computer graphics much, but it is integral on every single step of the way on any of this new art stuff. That computer graphics do play a large part in it. Now, when you get to the fine art and painting and sculpture, you may think you won't use it as much, but you really can. It can really enhance your process. A lot of times I will draw something out on a piece of paper and I'll scan it in or take a picture of it, and I want to blow it up and change it, and I'll put it in my digital projector, and so I'll digitize it. I'll basically just bring it in the computer, and I'll save a JPEG file and stick that inside of my projector, and I can project that on the wall if I'm going to do a large mural or something like that. Technology is not your enemy. So that about does it for the show today. As you can see, there's an endless array of ways of being an artist and making a living from it. Yeah, a lot of people don't think about all of the different things that touches you that involves art and artists. As an artist, I've always been, I shouldn't say I. As an artist, many times we're underdogs in society. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies from being, we're artists. I mean, you got to be crazy a little bit to be an artist. I know there's Yeah, you can't go outside and look at a sunset as an artist and just go, wow, that's a really pretty sunset. You're sitting there looking at, well, how's this color work with that color? And I wouldn't use this color there. And if I painted it like that, if I painted something like that, no one would believe that's actually real. It's a curse and a blessing, like a lot of talents are. But a career in art is something that isn't for everybody, but it sure is rewarding when you can figure it out and get it done. I didn't even talk about photography really, or I didn't talk about music or writing or any of the other performing arts that are out there. Those are all very similar, and anything you see, listen to, other than smell, and even smells, people do design smells too, and sounds. It's just a whole world that opens up as soon as you kind of open your eyes and broaden your horizons to look at what actually is done. So the next time you're in a store, just pick up a random package, hold it in your hand and look at it, and just wonder, who was the person behind this part? Who was the person behind this picture? Who was the person behind picking this font? Who decided where to fold this lid over? And who designed the product? Because those are all done by somebody with an art and creative background. So, all right, everybody, if you liked what you heard this time, do me a favor. Subscribe to the show here on YouTube. I'm also on my podcast. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, please subscribe. I would love any show reviews, good, bad, or ugly. If they're good, I'll feel good about it. If they're bad, it'll give me something to work towards to improve. So please add reviews, share the show. And until next time, this has been episode 6. I hope you enjoyed it, and go get creative.